So, ladies and gentlemen, somehow the Emperor has returned. Oh yes, we've got an interview here with Ian McDiarmid, who of course plays the Emperor. And it's an interesting one, as an article or as an interview. Revenge of the Sith supervillain Ian McDiarmid on his Star Wars heel turn, Rise of Skywalker Backlash, and Steven Spielberg's reaction to the Emperor, oh my god, you're evil. So, I thought we'd take a look really, because it's just interesting, isn't it? Revenge of the Sith came out recently, came out recently. Did really well, actually, at the box office. As you can see here. What did it take? $42.2 million worldwide. It's pretty good for a re-release, isn't it? It does go to show, doesn't it? People's sort of nostalgia is real. Like, people really are nostalgic for better times. Don't know whether I think Revenge of the Sith is really better, but not great as a film. But never mind. You know, I remember a time when the prequels were hated. Now they're compared to the sequels, and so yeah, not as maligned. But anyway, thought we'd take a look at this. Thought it'd be interesting. Hit subscribe if you are new here. Do turn those bell notifications on. But let's take a look again. My main focus here is what he thinks of the backlash and things like that. So. Says Darth Vader might be the face of the Empire in the Star Wars saga, but even he has a boss. Obviously, we know that. The Emperor has existed as long as the franchise itself, from a passing mention in New Hope to his unexpected and controversial reappearance in The Rise of Skywalker. Sorry. But the prequel finale, Revenge of the Sith, now re-released in theatres and celebrating its 20th anniversary on May 19th, forms the inflection point between his benevolent public persona and his true and truly evil identity. Remarkably, Scottish actor Ian McDiarmid has inhabited the role for 42 years, along with Anthony Daniels as C-3PO. That ranks among the longest tours of duty in Star Wars history. So, to commemorate Revenge of the Sith, McDiarmid spoke with Variety from his flat in London to discuss the character's climactic pivot and the process of building his arc after first being cast in the role. So, Revenge of the Sith marked Palpatine's true heel turn. Was it more fun playing his duality and manipulation, or finally leaning into that unambiguous evil? So this is the question, and his response is, the manipulation was always fun, but also I had more to do in Revenge of the Sith. I had more screen time, more time with Hayden Christensen, so that was more satisfying. I also had no idea that Palpatine would have power with a weapon, so to find that he was very good, to give my stunt double full credit with a saber, was interesting. How carefully mapped out was Palpatine's arc when you were first rehired to play him in The Phantom Menace? It wasn't mapped out at all. When I first got the part, I had no idea what the world was that I'd be in charge of as the Emperor. So it started off as a big mystery. I had no idea that Palpatine would figure into the story so heavily, but by then it so happened that I was young enough to play the younger senator. And when I first met George about it, he said, "Do you know anyone who wants to play an Emperor?" I said, "I think you know the answer to that question." And then I got the script and realised that he was more than one character, which made it even more fascinating to play. An ordinary, everyday, fairly hypocritical politician with a monster hiding inside his body. Sounds like politicians in general, doesn't it? Was there any early mention of the character that clued you in on what you wanted to focus on in your performance? Not really. Back in 82, I met George in a 10-minute chat over lunchtime. My agent told me if I wanted to be, I could be the Emperor of the universe. I knew he was at the centre of power, so I speculated in my head about maybe how he got there, but also it didn't seem relevant because I died. But the more I did it, I thought it was a really tremendous invention of George's. It was fairly obvious to us all that he had more in mind than just an exciting adventure story for kids. In playing the character later on, was there a sort of reverse engineering on his decrepitude? Well, it was supposed to be my age, which was early 50s when I did Palpatine for the first time, so it wasn't so much that he was aging, but when he got that monstrous face and he was sort of in transition physically as well as mentally, the aging process wasn't really relevant. The evil process was. It's like when Dr. Jekyll turned into Mr. Hyde, and as I'm approaching his age myself, although the body is failing, the mind is as active as ever. Palpatine certainly had a hyperactive mind. Interesting. It says this is a character who can turn on emotion when needed. When reality are you playing? What reality, sorry, are you playing as an actor to be able to tap into those feelings? Well, he's a hypocrite, plain and simple, and a very good actor. He's a performance. He's only interested in one thing, absolute power. It sounds objective and black and white, but it's extraordinary. If you think people who have absolute power, or pretty damn near it, you think that's all they want, really, wealth, and to be able to run people. But also, he was a Sith from far way back. Now, I don't really know what that means, but that particular personality is completely different from everybody else. He plays the human, but he isn't one. Palpatine embodies the dark side. He relishes it. He thinks people who don't enjoy it or don't allow themselves to be drawn into it are stupid. Interesting. George Lucas's dialogue is famous for being a little bit stiff, but I feel like that formality serves Palpatine. I think that's fair. Although underneath it, I managed to find a lot with it. Oh, a lot of wit in it, sorry. I mean, obviously he hated the word friend. He thought it was stupid that people had friends because that was a sign of weakness. So when it came to a word like that, I could sort of dish it out with a bit of contempt. Brilliant. Anakin obviously experienced a lot of trauma in his past. How much of Palpatine's work manipulating him was aided by that trauma? This is a really good interview, by the way. Hopefully you're enjoying it as much as I am. I wouldn't want to quantify it, but that's right, it's both. Palpatine sees the spark of ambition and he cultivates it. In the opera scene, when Anakin asks him to help save Padme's life, the phrase he uses is "not from a Jedi." In other words, you're going to have to betray everything that you think you stand for in order to join this side. You've got to embrace evil and all of its totality. Otherwise, you'll be no use to yourself, let alone me. It's amazing, manipulative stuff. That scene at the opera was, for me anyway, the apotheosis of it. He invites him into this world to be his right-hand man, and as Palpatine gets physically more frail, Vader will become stronger. The fight with Mace Windu, where Palpatine reveals his true form, offered you a great opportunity for scenery chewing. What sort of collaboration did you have with George to modulate the intensity of that moment? I thought I'd gone much too far, and George said, no, you can go much further. It's the moment when the monster becomes available, and he is ecstatic with delight because he can lose the hypocritical face. When we were doing The Phantom Menace, George said, you should think of your face as a carapace. As if we'd made me up. And underneath it was the real person. That was great. Because to believe that my own face and voice were utterly manufactured was a huge help. What interesting insights into that film. I also watched Return of the Jedi, and the way your character sits in that is kind of funny. He's got his heavy slouch on the throne. Were there any performance details like that you brought back for the prequels to plant a seed of what was to come? Not really. My approach is never what you might call method. It's the words on the page and what they do to me inside, as you know. Somebody else was cast as the Emperor in The Empire Strikes Back, and they couldn't do it for some reason. Mary Selway, the casting director, assured George that I could play old. Having seen me play the old Howard Hughes, he was called Henry Hackamore, in Sam Shepard's play Seduced. At 38, I played a number of parts which are much older than my years, and because I saw the makeup and the cane, I knew I had to be decrepit. But inside, there was this terrible, unbelievable power which was stronger than anybody else in the universe of the Star Wars movies. So, we'll scroll through some of this. This is just talking about previous actors, blah, blah, blah. And it says this. So scroll through this. Were there a moment when you became convinced that you were done playing this character for the last time? Oh, yes. I mean, I thought he was killed. Didn't we all, mate? So when I got a call to come in and talk about the prequels, to find out about Sidious and all the rest of it, I thought, I've got lucky again. But I thought this is definitely the finish. And then J.J. Abrams called me and said, he's coming back. That was great to do, too. Then to find out that I had a granddaughter who was out to get me was very satisfying, too. Particularly played by Daisy Ridley. Did anyone explain to you how this character had children in the first place? There was never any discussion of any of that. I bet there wasn't. It was up to me to work it out in my head. There was a talk in The Phantom Menace about something called midichlorians, which were involved somehow in Anakin's birth. George didn't want to get too deeply into that. But we reckoned it was kind of a virgin birth. Though one ought not to say that because God knows you get all sorts of complications. Then people asked the slightly embarrassing question about, does this evil monster ever have sex? And when we don't really know the answer to that question either, things in tubes you think about probably, rather than the awful vision that you might have in your head of this monster ever having a sexual relationship with anybody. Ian McDiarmid's a legend. What were the things that you did know coming into The Rise of Skywalker? What did you have to work out for yourself? It seemed entirely probable that Palpatine had Plan B, even though he was very, very badly damaged. He would be able to be put it together in some form. When I realised I had sort of astral wheelchair, that was even better. Astral wheelchair. I just sort of had these 4 guys who whisked me around the studio. I can't tell you how much fun that was. Daisy was more worried was more worried about that than anything else. And then, of course, we had to devise another makeup look, which was even more grotesque than the previous one. Bloody amazing. Was there, at some point, supposed to be a series based around Palpatine? Was any of that backstory shared with you as part of the character's mythology? Just the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise. It's fairly obvious that my character murdered Plagueis on his road to becoming Palpatine. But beyond that, no. With George, you didn't discuss anything really. You turn up and you shoot. These films take a long time to make and the pressure is intense for many reasons. Of course, George was at the forefront of all of that. So he had all of that to think about day to day. He takes a good deal of trouble over casting, but once he's cast, then he likes the actors to get on with it. For example, the scene at the opera. I'd already done a scene in the makeup in the morning. We went to do that in the afternoon, and my voice wasn't in its best shape. It's probably the most Palpatine had ever spoken in the movie. I was kind of hoarse, so I was worried about that, mainly because I had about 4 wind machines being driven at me in the scene, where he's turning into the monster. So I was a bit throaty. And we did it about 20 times on a Friday afternoon. Not the best time to shoot when everyone wants to get off for the weekend. And in addition to my throat and the fact it was late in the afternoon on a Friday, there was a birthday party for the first AD, and a man in a gold suit, i.e. Anthony Daniels, was busy getting the champagne ready just off the set on a trolley. Then at one point, a mobile phone went off and the person answered it. So all of that was going on just outside my vision, but oddly enough, when the pressure's on, and the concentration could be even more intense. In a strange way, it may have helped the case. It helped the scene. What an interview. This is so bizarre. Anyway, here we get to the hatred. There were some adverse reactions to The Rise of Skywalker. How did you feel about the backlash to bringing back the Emperor? Well, there's always something, isn't there? I don't read that stuff, and I'm not online, so it'll only reach me if someone mentions it. I thought there might be a bit of a fuss about bringing him back, but as I said, mine and Palpatine's logic was entirely reasonable. This man, who was horribly maimed, thought maybe one day it might happen to him, and we've got to have a plan B. I love the whole idea that he should come back and be even more powerful than he was before, though this time he had to be utterly destroyed. So I think he's dead. For many of the actors in these huge franchises, it feels like the visibility that it gives them can be a double-edged sword. Has there, over the years, been a sort of reckoning over how helpful or unhelpful the role in terms of people appreciating your versatility as an actor? And he talks about it being on stage and things like that. It's interesting how he doesn't really say anything about the Palpatine series, like not at all. Sort of, I guess, kind of to a degree, but not a lot. So it's interesting. I like this as an interview. I think it's a really interesting one. So there you go. I don't have anything else really to say, to be honest. It's an interesting interview. This was even condensed, so this would have been a long conversation that they had with him. It's a good one. It's really, really good. And I like the fact, this is someone that's, well, he might be completely true. He says that completely right. Being completely honest here, where he just says, yeah, I'm not online, so I don't really know, but I like the idea, and this is the idea that I had, and it sort of worked for me. So there you go. Somehow Palpatine returned, and here is the explanation. What do you think? Let me know down below. Hopefully you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. I thought it was great. Take care. Bye-bye now.